everyone, this is The Common Thread, the official podcast of the Howard Thurman Center for Common Ground. I'm Amanda Dowd.
I'm Will Clapp.
I'm Howard DePass Jr.
And we're talking about something that has been getting a lot of press lately, both nationally and especially here at BU, gender-neutral housing. It's been debated a lot. You have the CGSA working hard on it. You have student government working hard on it. And we do have a friend of ours who came in today to talk to us, Swanson Ninan. He's an MLK Scholar and also an LGBTQ activist. Thanks, Swanson, for coming on.
Thanks for having me, you guys.
Yeah, so we're really excited. So we're just going to be talking about all things gender-neutral housing related, and I am super excited about it. I feel like it'll be really good to clarify some misconceptions and just get an update on what's going on, because I feel like a lot of people aren't sure what's going on right now at this point, now that it's died down a little bit. But just to start, Student Gov started trying to get this implemented a couple of years ago. They came up with a 5-year multi-step plan, and from that, you have Gender Neutral BU. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so student government submitted this really thorough proposal to the BU administration, and essentially the proposal was accepted, and gender neutral housing was going to be a thing, and then the administration decided that it was not their top priority anymore, and decided to halt the process. So gender neutral BU kind of formed as a response to that, and it formed from leaders of student government and the CGSA and other community members, all people who were interested in helping this cause of gender neutral housing.
And from my understanding, you have student government kind of got it started, but now they have like the logistical end, and the CGSA is heading up the advocacy end. So it's very much like a dual process and a dual cause at this point. But I want you to tell me a little bit about your involvement with it and why you're interested in it, why you're for it. Just tell me what your views are on it.
So I think it's something that's really important for all students at BU. It really should just be an option to live with whoever you want to live with. It's an issue of comfortability, but it's also an issue of safety for some students. And what I like to say is that everyone has a gender, so this is an issue that applies to everybody, not just a certain group of people. This is completely applicable to all students of the BU community. So that's how I like to kind of start off my saying of whenever I'm talking about this issue.
Go ahead.
Personally, I kind of feel like it's absurd that we don't already have it, and I think that it's odd that there's not more of a precedent set by other schools in the country. So
Brown has it.
Yeah, well, of course Brown has it. But are there
Brown.
other schools that we're using as a sort of model for how we want to implement this, or I guess, is there inspiration coming from other schools?
Yeah, there's a number of schools that have really amazing programs for gender neutral housing. I'm pretty sure NYU is one of those. I believe George Washington University is also one of them. And those are very similar institutions to Boston University.
Big urban schools.
Big urban schools. And so I think that was a big part of the student government's proposal, is that look at these comparable institutions. They have this. What's wrong? Not what's wrong with us, but why aren't we necessarily keeping up with them in this issue?
Do you know how long ago they instituted gender neutral housing?
I do not know exactly when it started. I'm pretty sure it's a fairly recent initiative, however.
Okay.
Can you tell me why? What is it that made you want to get involved, like from a personal standpoint? Why did this speak out to you or call to you?
So I've had really positive experiences with BU housing. That being said, I know some people who have had really negative experiences with their roommates. I got really lucky last year. I was placed in a triple in West Campus, and I got along really well with my roommates. They were both really respectful, and we were able to have a really comfortable environment. But not all students are as lucky as I was, and I do know a couple friends who have been really uncomfortable with their roommates because their roommates don't necessarily respect them, their sexual identity, their gender identity, and it's really not fair. for the BU students to have to pay this much to live in housing that makes them uncomfortable and makes them feel unsafe. And, you know, it's a really big issue because freshmen do not have an option of living off campus. You know, if I have a bad experience my first year, I have the option to move off campus and live with whoever I want. I can live by myself if I can afford that, or I can live with friends. Freshmen don't have that option. They have to live on campus. And you know, not everyone can afford to live in a single and live by themselves on campus. It's really expensive, and you know, some people have to live in doubles or triples or quads. So they really should have that option of choosing who they live with.
Go ahead.
Do you think that like you would still be this passionate about it if you didn't have such a pleasant experience with your roommates, or do you feel like your experience has really helped to shape you know, like not only your stance on this issue, but you know, your need and your want to like go forward with it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that my good experience makes me want to be on the side of BU housing. You know, I had a good experience. I want to make sure other people have a good experience. And I think that if I didn't have a good experience, I would be fighting maybe even harder than I am right now for this issue, just to make sure that, you know, people have like the best experience they can have. You know, this is college. This is a really good time for forming our identities and, you know, coming into fruition with ourselves. And just, I want to make sure that everyone has that, you know, amazing opportunity to do that.
You know, I feel like on a more serious note, you mentioned that sometimes this can be a safety issue for certain students who maybe fit outside the gender binary, if you will. But unfortunately, some people tend to make light of the issue. There was a BU Today video.
Yes.
It was honestly a joke. I mean, I saw it, and they basically just made it into, oh, you have, you know, a girlfriend and boyfriend living together, and there's going to be hair in the drain.
Yeah.
You know? Can you talk a little bit about why this is such a serious issue that goes way beyond that? Yeah.
So it's interesting because, you know, that BU Speaks video is kind of, it does show what some community people are thinking about the topic, which I think just goes to show that we have a lot to do in terms of, you know, educational outreach on this topic. Sure, it can be an issue of, you know, I'm a guy and I want to live with my best friend who's a girl, but it also has to do with, you know, people who don't necessarily fit into the gender binary of male or female and don't feel safe living with somebody of the quote-unquote same sex.
Right.
And, you know, that video kind of just touches on a bunch of stereotypes on, you know, how people think of boys and how people think of girls. And, you know, boys are dirty and girls are clean. Girls have a lot of shoes and take up, you know, those kinds of issues, which sometimes are true and sometimes are not. And it's important to keep that in mind when you're talking about this kind of issue, because for a lot of people that is what the problem is. You know, like, if I'm a guy, like, can I live with a girl? I don't know if I could handle that. But for some people, it is a serious issue of being able to feel comfortable in their home and making sure they have that sense of, this is where I live. I want to be able to be as comfortable as I can be.
Right.
It seems like from the BU Today video and just people I've talked to in general, there are tons of misconceptions about what gender-neutral housing would be and like what its purpose is. But at the same time, it's necessary to have the support of the student body because, I mean, this is supposed to be at least a semi-democratic system.
Yeah.
So how would you suggest that we educate more people so that they can understand the issues and can put in their support for this kind of thing?
I think that's a really good point. I think that it's, you know, on a personal level, I found that video extremely frustrating. But I really do understand where people are coming from. They don't mean it maliciously. It's just maybe they don't have a friend who, you know, is outside of the gender binary. And I can't blame them for that, you know. What I can do is try to reach out to them and say, hey, I have a lot of friends who don't fit into this binary, and they would really appreciate having the option to live with whoever they want. So I know the Gender Neutral BU initiative is working on a zine which is kind of like a self-published magazine. I don't know if you all know what those are. But they're going to be doing that, and it's going to have kind of educational components to it and give definitions to what does it mean to be outside of the gender binary? You know, what does it mean to be transgender? What's the difference between transgender and transsexual? It'll cover a lot of these issues. And you know, that kind of thing is going to be really helpful for the BU community to understand you know, the other issues of gender neutral housing.
And let me just clarify really quick, the BU Today video, it was heavily edited. I spoke to someone involved with it, and she was just like, yeah, they asked us the stupidest questions, and even when we tried to speak about the, you know, the gender issue, they didn't put that in. So that was really BU Today, just being extremely, I don't know, I can't even call it that journalism. I mean, it was ridiculous. It was definitely not
more editing than they needed.
It was really stupid. I'm like, really, you guys? I do want to clarify one other point. You know, I mean, I feel like we do need to talk about the criticisms of gender neutral housing.
Definitely.
I have been told that there's this misconception that people, you know, students think that they could be randomly put into
assigned to their
a gender neutral apartment or suite. That's not true at all.
Kind of defeat the purpose even.
Exactly.
It actually does. It completely.
I mean, if the goal is to have a safe space, and you're just putting like
random person, it's like, okay.
All right, nothing has changed. Great.
That could never happen. From what I was told, and my own, you know, research looking at the language of it, it's the type of situation where everyone opts in together. You know exactly who you're going to be living with. But then there's the really common argument against it seems to be, well, what if you have a straight couple living together?
Right. And I think I'm really glad you brought that up. I think that's you know, I was talking to my mom about this, and I was on the phone, and she got really serious, and she goes, Swanson, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but what happens when a couple wants to live together? And it's important to recognize that kind of argument is valid in some ways, but it's also really heteronormative in the sense that it's assuming that all people are straight and all people are heterosexual, and that's not the reality of the world we live in. A lot of people don't identify with heterosexuality, and you know, right now I could live with my boyfriend as the way things are. And that's
if you're living with just another guy.
If I'm living with just another guy, there's no, you know, BU rule that says that I can't be dating that person. So it's important to keep that in mind when we're having these kinds of discussions. That, that is a possibility if we have gender neutral housing, but that's also a possibility right now.
Right.
And another thing I like to say is that we're at the point in our lives where we're becoming adults, and we're making our own decisions. And if you make the decision to live with a partner on BU housing, that's your decision. And some people might see it as immature, some people might see it as a smart decision, but whatever, it's your decision, and you're going to have to either deal with the repercussions or the consequences, or you'll get to see how awesome it is. But it really is your decision.
I tend to feel that way. I mean, whenever, especially when I hear a parent be like, "I don't want my daughter living with her boyfriend. I don't want my son living with his girlfriend." I'm like, if your child is stupid or smart enough, depending on the situation, to live with their boyfriend or girlfriend, let them do it. Like, that's not. I don't honestly. I feel like maybe it's harsh. I don't feel like it's a problem. You know.
Yeah, I think also it just comes down to a value judgment. Like, we have to ask ourselves, what's more important, that couples aren't living together, or that these individuals who are affected by gender-neutral housing have a safe space to go to and can be comfortable living there? Because these are circumstances that they have to deal with for an entire year. Housing does not make it easy to switch.
No.
So.
No, they don't.
Not to mention, I feel like it's a very puritanical argument, and I would invite anybody to come visit me on the weekends if they want to see how things really go. You know, not.
Whoa.
I don't mean it in a negative way, but let's be real. I mean, it's not like we're, you know, living a traditional lifestyle here.
Right.
You know.
Right.
I mean, it's just the way it is. But then, you know, someone else brought up to me that you do need a certain maturity, I think, to live in a gender-neutral situation, especially if you're someone who is not necessarily transgendered or gay or fits within the LGBTQ community. For example, let's say you're straight and cisgendered and just want to live with your friends. And someone said, oh, well, you know, what if someone is drunk and they see their roommate in a towel and something happens? You know, that the uncomfortable situations. What if there's some sort of sexual harassment situation? Like, what's your response to that?
So my response to that is, and I think my response to a lot of these questions are, you know, educational outreach. There are ways that we can inform the community on like how to deal with these issues, and whether that means, you know, a little bit of extra training for the residence assistants, the RAs, or if that means having a pamphlet distributed to those gender-neutral housing rooms that say, hey, you're living with someone either of the opposite gender or someone who doesn't identify with the gender binary. Here are some problems, or here are some things that might happen when you're living with this person. Here are some ways to, here are some communication skills that you can use to talk about whatever issues that may come up. And it's also important to recognize that these issues can happen in same gender rooms right now. And there's also a way to go about addressing those as well.
No, absolutely.
Another concern that I've heard by some people who I've spoken to is that college as a whole, you know, whether it's housing or you know, different clubs or organizations that we may be involved in, you know, our preferences, colleges and universities tend to make us feel really comfortable in our own space, something that the outside world and the real world may not always do. When we, you know, when we finally graduate, when we finally go into our work lives and so on and so forth, we may not get the same shelter and the same comforting experience that college offers. So I guess my question is, how do you feel about like that dynamic, you know, about maybe sheltering someone too much to the point where you almost give them a false illusion of what they may encounter once they leave, and that may wind up harming them as opposed to helping them?
Yeah, I'm actually really glad you brought that up. It's something I've been kind of thinking about in my own life a lot lately. And I think when I think about that, I think how BU is, in my personal life, preparing me for the real world, and it's also going to help me discover which communities I'm going to want to live in after college. And I really identify with the queer community, the LGBTQ community, and I know that after I graduate, I'm going to be looking to kind of settle in some sort of queer-friendly community. And I think that it's not necessarily sheltering students. You know, it is in a way preparing them and helping them develop their personal sense of identity and helping them figure out where they want to go with their life after college.
And I mean, I tend to agree with that. I mean, you know, on a broader view, there are places on this campus that I don't necessarily like to go because I don't agree with the ideology or the point of view or the practice, whatever, you know, what have you. But when I go home at the end of the day, I don't want to be dealing with opposition. I just want to chill. You know, I don't want to have to deal with any opposition. I just want to, you know, be. You know?
And it's really problematic when you don't feel comfortable enough to do that. When you have this sense of stress when you're sitting in your bed, you know, is your roommate gonna make fun of you for what you're wearing? Is your roommate gonna throw some nasty words at you? Are they just gonna harass you? You know, those are real issues that a lot of people have to deal with.
I mean, I think the very extreme case that goes way beyond anything gender neutral into, you know, just it was a crime was the Tyler Clementi case at Rutgers. You know, with his roommate. Filming, and that's a hate crime, so that's an extreme situation. But you know, it's possible that had he had the option to choose a roommate who fit within the LGBTQ community, it wouldn't have been an issue.
Do we know if they like have had any of that sort of housing implementation now, or like for Rutgers? I mean,
I haven't heard anything.
Me neither, actually.
I don't know, actually.
I'm definitely gonna look that up later, though.
I've heard about other things around, like different schools putting in things, like starting to implement it, or they've already implemented it.
Yeah, I think that spoke to everybody across the nation. Really,
You did mention, though, like, those different situations that can arise, because obviously you're dealing with, kinds of problems that sometimes that your average cisgender person doesn't have to deal with. And that maybe, RAs need to be specially trained to deal with those issues. How do you think they should be trained? Who should be training them? What should be included in them?
Let's see. So I think it's important to note that while I refer to them now as like quote unquote different issues, I think that I firmly believe that once we are a year or so into gender neutral housing, these quote unquote issues are going to become sort of normalized, and it will be no problem having to deal with them, and they'll become just like any other sort of roommate problem that you could have right now. But in terms of training, what sort of training for RAs, I think it would be how I would start off with like defining some maybe confusing terms for RAs. Starting off with, what does transgender mean? And what does cisgender mean? And I think
actually tell them what cisgender, because I just realized I'm using the term cisgendered and not everybody knows what it means.
So transgender is when your gender does not align with the gender you were assigned at birth. Cisgender is where your gender and your sex that you were assigned at birth match up. So
it's the equivalent of saying gay and straight.
Right. Yeah. So I am a cisgender male in the sense that I identify my gender as male, and I am biologically a male. So I am privileged enough that my sex and my gender match up. So I am cisgendered. So, going through these sorts of steps with RAs and making sure they understand these terms and understand that while it might not happen a lot, it is common enough that, we really do need to, we do need to be addressing these. Other than that, I don't know what the RA training is like, but I think there's a lot to say about just going over communication skills and going over what it means to be respectful. As cheesy as that sounds, I think that can go a long way, and just re-emphasizing listening to people and hearing out what they have to say, and really respecting people's identities and also where they're coming from, what their family upbringing is, those kinds of things.
Yeah, I'm an RA now, and the good thing about training is that we're taught a bunch of things on a very we're taught to be very versatile. So whether it's a lockout or somebody can't stand their roommate, we have to be able to sort of assess all these different situations, being neutral, being respectful of each other. And so like when you mentioned that you don't think it would be very different from any other situation, I do actually agree with that. That once it comes to the point where it's been sort of quote unquote normalized, and people can move forward with it, then it won't be such a issue that you have to put a lot of thought into, like, man, how am I going to solve this issue?
Right.
But once it's actually incorporated into the training program, these different terms, which are very important. Like, I just want to say, like, personally, like, I think if one thing people can really misunderstand are the terms themselves, and just because they don't know. Like no one's told them, they haven't looked it up, they simply don't.
And you can't blame them for that.
No,
Right.
you definitely can't. I feel like maybe not, and I don't mean this as a diss, but not all RAs are created equal. Like, there are definitely some who are great, who understand the sensitivity of human power.
Thank you.
And then some who might not be as on board, and taking into account that, especially when you're assigning it with a more sensitive issue like gender neutral housing, especially when it's new. I think that's important. Do you think it would be beneficial, especially in the beginning stages, for them, when I say them, Res Life, to bring in maybe outside training resources like LGBTQ organization in Boston?
That's a good question. I haven't put that much thought into that. I think that there could be value in doing something like that, but I also think it's important that the issue isn't looked at as like something that's gonna like we know that we need to not take the attitude that we know there's going to be issues with this. There are going to be problems, so we need to have this outside training to make sure we know how to deal with it. I think that if done correctly, there are appropriate ways to have this training for RAs, but it does need to be carefully done, just so that people don't feel alienated by this, because that's the point. That's the opposite of the point of gender neutral housing. We want to make sure that these people are feeling the community and aren't feeling alienated, and we want to make sure that they feel loved and comfortable.
So we've talked about gender neutral housing up until
Yeah.
now. But the new thing that seems to be really getting a lot of attention are gender neutral bathrooms.
Yeah.
I can't even tell you. I mean, I Googled just to see gender neutral housing. We had a few things come up, and then I Googled gender neutral bathrooms, and can I just say the number of results? I mean, it is becoming like a huge phenomenon everywhere. What do you think? What do you think about that? I'm just curious.
I love gender neutral bathrooms. I'll just start off with that. I think
Into a t-shirt.
I know. I would wear that all the time. Maybe
Right.
not all the time. But I think that it's another really important issue that I think is getting more and more attention, because it's something that once again applies to everyone. Everyone has to use a bathroom. You can't always use the bathroom in your home. People have to use public bathrooms, and a lot of harassment happens in bathrooms, and it's important to note that. And there are a lot of misconceptions about gender neutral bathrooms that I would love to help clear up. I think that when I think about bringing gender neutral bathrooms to BU, it's not taking every single bathroom and making it gender neutral. It's about taking some bathrooms and making them gender neutral, but then also keeping the male-female bathrooms, because the point is to respect all people's genders. And I identify as a male. That's my gender. So you want to make sure you respect that. And this past weekend, actually, I went to the 5 College Queer Conference at Hampshire College. Over in Western Mass, and it was a really amazing opportunity, because they have quote unquote all gender bathrooms, which is a term, I guess like a phrase that I hadn't even considered. All gender versus gender neutral, which I think is really awesome that they use this language of all gender, because it's even more inclusive and even more welcoming than gender neutral.
Is there a difference between that and gender neutral, or is it just like the phrasing?
It might be phrasing. I don't know. I was thinking about it, and I think I'm more comfortable with all gender, the term all gender, just because gender neutral almost seems neutralizing, which seems obvious, but all gender seems just more like inclusive and more of like an umbrella term. And more than that, they have their versions of male and female bathrooms are they have signs that say this bathroom is for self-identified males. So it really makes you think, how do I identify with my gender? I'm making a conscious decision to identify in a certain way, which I think is really important, because it does make people think.
I read a really interesting article, because obviously we're talking about this as college students. We're all legal adults. We're going out into the world. We have a louder voice, so to speak. But there was not too long ago an issue with a girl in Colorado who, she's very young. She's 6 or 7, and she's transgendered, so she was born a boy. And she wanted to use the girls' bathroom at school because she identifies as female, and the school told her she wasn't allowed to. They asked her instead to use like those family restrooms, or the nurses' bathroom. They didn't or the boys' bathroom. And I was reading it, and my knee-jerk response was to be like, that's awful, you know, what is wrong with them? Like, why are they being so ridiculous? And then I saw the criticism, and they said that they took into account her feelings, but also the issues of other people being uncomfortable, the other students who might feel weird.
Yeah.
And I kind of got it. I did, like, I'll admit, like, I can see why it would be confusing, because as she gets older, she's going to develop, you know, a penis, and that's the reality until she goes through that surgery. But at the same time, it was a little upsetting to me that you don't have kids who are being raised to understand it and to deal with it, you know? And it's one of those sticky situations where it's like, yeah, I get that kids are going to be uncomfortable, but should they really be uncomfortable, you know?
Yeah.
So it's kind of one of those, like, it starts at home. Does.
Yeah, and I feel like that's really a cultural thing. Like,
it is a cultural
our society has always, well, most of the time been pretty, like, heteronormative, and that still comes out a lot, but that's changing. Like, last year, for the first time ever, more than half of the country supported same-sex marriage. So that heteronormativity is kind of going away, and it's doing it slowly, but I think it is going away. And so eventually, maybe in the next 50 or 100 years, we will start raising our kids with this idea that gender and sexuality are fluid, and you are what you identify as. So maybe these early cases are just like sort of test runs, like the first ones who will set the standard of acceptance for later.
Right. And it's unfortunate for them that they have to be the test run.
Yeah.
Right.
It would be terrible.
Nobody wants to be.
No, but I mean, it'll
But it
help
has to.
everyone in the end, because we have to get over this.
The other issue that kind of came up with gender-neutral bathrooms is that on a very basic level that really anyone can relate with is, what if you have, you know, a small child and their opposite-sex parent? You know, like you have a 3-year-old boy with his mom or something like that. And I remember when I was younger, you know, I mean, when I was really little, my dad would take me to the bathroom and it wasn't a big deal, but then there would become an age where it wasn't appropriate, and, you know, I know that it was nerve-wracking, because, like, if my mom wasn't there, you know, I was too old to go into the men's room, but he certainly couldn't come with me in the women's restroom.
Right.
And, you know,
Decisions.
and it's like, you know, like, okay, I'll stand outside the door, but I don't know what's going on. And I feel like, honestly, it would be a little bit more nerve-wracking, especially if you're a mom with a little boy, because, you know, I'm just going to say it, it's a little bit more dangerous when you have men. You don't know what's going on in there. That's very NPC, but I think it's a reality. So people are saying, you know, let's have gender-neutral bathrooms for that reason.
Right.
And the University of Central Florida actually just, they basically repurposed family bathrooms and just said all-inclusive, like gender-neutral. And it was really just a matter of language, but it was their acknowledgement of the issue, you know, which I think is totally valid. But then there are some people who are like, no, this segregates people. Why do we have this at all? It segregates those who fit outside the gender binary by putting them in their own space. You're taking them away. You're not just letting them use male-female bathrooms.
I don't think it's about not letting them use male-female bathrooms. It's just about giving them another option if they want that.
Some people do, but some are like, no, they're not allowed to use. Like, if you're transgender, they don't want you using your...
Okay.
Like, if you're male to female transgendered, they don't want you using the women's bathroom because biologically you're not a woman.
And I think that this entire conversation, in society we put so much emphasis on biology. Everything that we do, I think, is centered on biology, and, you know, where's the science in this? And I think that it's important to take into consideration how, this might sound silly, but how people feel and how people identify. And, you know, people's feelings are always going to be valid, and biology is always going to be developing, and we're always going to be finding out new information. So it's important to keep that into consideration when we're talking about these sorts of things, that, you know, in the end, we're not going to know everything about biology.
And do you think, I'm just curious, like, what do you think is the ideal bathroom situation? Because you have some people, I feel like there are the two polar opposites. You have the people who say there should be nothing like that, there's male and female, done. you know.
Yeah.
And then there are the other people who say, no, there should be, no, bathrooms should never be segregated.
Yeah.
It should be everybody all in there together. And
Yeah.
I personally don't think that either is the answer.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Well, I kind of have an ideal, and I think that my answer for ideally is having all gender-neutral bathrooms. I think that we can all get to a point where we're comfortable using, these facilities with whoever identifies with whatever gender. That being said, I think the reality of our life is that that's not going to happen. I think that being said, there are definite steps we can take towards having gender-neutral facilities.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that a first easy step is, having a few gender-neutral bathrooms in all institutions. Boston University. This is, in my eyes, it's something that can, kind of easily be done. It's, the change of a sign and a quick email saying that this is a gender-neutral facility. All people of all genders are permitted to use this bathroom. And, that is a first step of, yeah.
No, I just want to clarify. So having like a men's bathroom, a women's bathroom, and then a gender-neutral bathroom.
Mm-hmm. I think that in my eyes, that's a very, very fair first step.
Right.
And I would honestly be extremely happy with that.
Mm-hmm.
In the end, I would love to see all gender-neutral facilities everywhere in the world. Mm-hmm. But that's very idealistic of me.
Mm-hmm. What about you guys? What do you think?
I don't know. Like, I want to believe that.
Yeah.
And, like, I think objectively speaking, I do. And I have this weird, like, societal emotional reaction that's like, no, don't take away my men's bathroom. Like, objectively speaking, I know that's absurd because, like, I don't know. I think that all of these barriers that we draw up between ourselves are kind of, like, social constructs.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't.
Yeah. I don't know.
Good old Will.
So, I don't know. This is just a thing I have to think about more. I guess, okay, so objectively, I believe that everything should be all gender-neutral bathrooms, but, like, in my heart right now, I have to convince myself of that.
Right.
So, I don't know. It's weird.
What do you think?
Yeah. I take a similar stance where everything, when facing these big decisions, every concrete decision that one person makes has to come with a sound amount of education and, like, research, one that I admittedly don't have right now.
Yep.
But I do think that a lot of times, like, not only in our society but in our country, we overlook the comfort of others and then look to everybody else but ourselves when we have hate crimes, when we have like outlandish ridicule.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that stems from not exercising our like humanitarian side, to sort of comfort others and, make them feel like they can just be themselves, and if that takes a gender neutral bathroom here or there before, making it something that's more that you see everywhere, then I think that wouldn't hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that there should absolutely always be the option.
Yeah.
100%. Because I do see how it could be really uncomfortable, especially, like, if you are in transition, maybe it's not even about other people's comfort, but just your personal comfort,
Yeah.
Like, yes, you're becoming a woman or you're becoming a man in terms of you're starting that process to, like, going through, the hormone therapy, the surgery, but maybe you're still questioning a little bit. Maybe you're just not sure where you fit in, and it's a way of taking away the pressure of something super simple. I do think, I have to be honest, the people who think that we should never have any kind of segregation in bathrooms, though, at all, I think they're a little nuts.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, honestly, that could get into a little bit of a safety issue.
Definitely.
I don't think of myself as a pessimist at all, but I think that there are always going to be people who take advantage of the situation.
Yeah.
And if you have a situation where, you're not, anybody can just go into a bathroom. What if it's more secluded, or what if you have some kind of, predator that's gonna,
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes me uncomfortable, and I think that's a little too idealistic.
Right.
I guess I've watched too much America's Most Wanted.
I think it takes a balance,
It does take a balance.
I think that the gender neutral not housing, bathrooms it definitely isn't a bad idea. It's definitely something that a lot of people can benefit from.
Yeah.
But just because that happens doesn't mean that you can take away the male only and female only bathrooms, because I do think about that as well, because I could see that turning into a bad situation really quickly. And then having the entire country be in an uproar, this shouldn't have been the case,
Yeah.
So I think it's important to sort of maintain that balance.
I really think it's always the balance between the old and the new. What is okay with the old? Because not everything, and this is not just gender issues or sexuality issues, but in any situation as things change, what's okay to keep? And what do we need to change? It's that ever-evolving, push and pull between people who are more traditional and people who are, more, what's the word? More innovative?
Yeah,
Progressive,
perhaps.
Progressive.
There we go.
Thank you. I'm can't even speak today. I think it should be very interesting to see where it goes. I mean, for now, BU is definitely focusing on gender-neutral housing. And from what I hear, it is still, even though it's kind of been indefinitely postponed in terms of they don't have a date, I hear they're still working very hard on it.
Yeah.
And Dean Elmore is definitely collaborating with student government, which is great to hear, because I don't think it's been forgotten. I think it's just kind of in a limbo phase. So.
And on that note, I was going to ask if I can make a plug.
Of course you can.
So on Friday at 5:30, the Center for Gender, Sexuality, and Activism, also known as the CGSA, is going to be hosting a safer housing mixer. So if you are looking for a roommate next year, and you want to make sure that roommate is respectful and is perhaps comfortable with queer or trans students, come check us out, and we'll try to hook you up with a roommate, someone who you can feel comfortable around.
Okay, and that's Friday the 8th.
Friday the 8th at 5:30.
In the CGSA, so basement of the GSA.
Yep.
So if you guys are interested, definitely head down there. And I'm just, if people have questions about this in general, where is a good place for them to go?
I would say emailing Gender Neutral BU.
Okay.
They have, a lot of people working on that zine, and a lot of people who spend a lot of time working on these issues. So if you have any questions and you want to email them, it's genderneutralbu@gmail.com. Other than that, as silly as it sounds, I would say check out Tumblr. I think Tumblr has a vast amount of information on all issues pertaining to gender and sexuality, from, oh my God, I think I might be gay, to, oh my God, I think I might be trans. What do I do? What do I do? I don't know what to do. This is freaking me out, there's a really great internet community out there.
Absolutely. Well, Swanson, thank you so much for coming on.
Of course. Thank you for inviting me.
It was so great to have you. I'm really glad we had the conversation, and I feel like we maybe cleared up some points that are a little bit unclear.
Yeah, I hope so.
We hope to have you back at some
Yes,
point.
I would love that. Thank you all so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, let's see. I'm trying to think. We're going to be going on spring break. Woohoo!
Yay.
So we're super excited. Where are you guys going?
I'm going to Montana for alternative spring breaks.
Okay.
So that's exciting.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I
Howard.
will be heading back home to Atlanta, getting
Nice.
some
Nice.
Very nice.
relaxation and warm weather and Chick-fil-A.
Oh. And I'm also going on spring break. I'll be going on alternative spring break to Harpersbury, West Virginia. Swanson, you're going too.
Awesome.
I'm also going on an alternative spring breaks trip. I'm going to Flagstaff, Arizona.
Awesome.
I am so excited. I need a break.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm going to be hiking.
Yup.
It's about that time.
It's
Totally.
definitely
It's
about that time.
We've reached that time.
Well-deserved break.
No
Yeah.
kidding. But when we come back, we are planning to do an episode on...
Guns.
You guys knew it was coming at some point. I mean, we had to do it. It's going to be good.
Yeah, so
We'll
we
tackle
have
it.
2 members of College Republicans coming on to talk to us about.
But you didn't know they existed, huh? We're not starting this off on the wrong note. I'm sorry. No, we're very excited to have them.
Yeah,
in
we
case you
are.
can't tell, the 3 of us are pretty liberal.
I feel like after this episode.
Yeah.
I feel like it's pretty obvious, yeah. So we're getting, the other half of the population to come on, and we're going to talk about
We got to.
and gun control, and it's going to be an interesting conversation. I'm excited. But you guys should definitely tune back in. So that'll probably be in 2 weeks.
2 weeks,
So
2 weeks
stay
from today.
tuned. Don't forget about us. We won't forget about you. But thanks you guys so much for listening in. This is The Common Thread, the official podcast of the Howard Thurman Center for Common Ground. I'm Amanda Dowd.
I'm Will Clapp.
And I'm Howard DePass Jr.
And we'll see you after spring break.